Also, just a reminder to folks, if you registered under a different name than your Zoom name and you do want your certificate of completion, please just add your name and email address to the chat so we can be sure to get that to you. Thanks.
It's been a long and wonderful day already. We have our next presentation getting ready to start shortly. You still have 2 more minutes if you want to grab something to drink or check an email real quick. I just want to give a shout out to Dani, who's going to be doing the next presentation. This was kind of thrown in her lap. Eric Reynolds, who was going to do this presentation, is out for paternity leave for a wonderful, wonderful reason. And Dani was wonderful to step up to the plate. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Dani, if you're ready. If you guys could just keep muted unless you have a question to ask. The chat is available if you want to put a question or a comment. We have SERAC staffers that are monitoring the chat, and we'll make sure that questions are answered. You will receive a certificate after this. So as Katie mentioned earlier, if your name on the screen does not match what you registered with, please send us either a private message or rename yourself on the little PowerPoint, and I will go ahead and turn it over to Dani.
All right, can everybody hear me before I start blabbing away? Yes? All right, so I want to start off by apologizing because I am a little worried that some of you may be here to hear from Eric Reynolds. He is a very beloved coworker of mine who just oozes charisma. I am not that way, but I'm going to try my best to kind of channel him through this presentation. You'll be happy to see it was developed in part by Eric Reynolds, myself, and our colleague who you just heard from, Kelsey Binney. So there are some Eric vibes and Eric tones throughout the presentation. He is actually here right now as an attendee. As Debbie mentioned, he has a very wonderful reason for being out today. And for quite some time, he just had a beautiful little girl. So that being said, he's here in spirit. And I think that kind of is perfect for what we're about to talk about. We're going to talk about caring where you work, the impact of empathy in the workplace. I can say that Eric is here in spirit and quite literally here as an attendee because we here at SERAC work in a very empathetic place. We feel as though we're a part of the team. We care about each other, and you're going to see that kind of intertwined throughout the presentation here today, but it's just a beautiful, natural example of it happening in real life. So just to take a moment, I know you guys have kind of heard us mention who we are and what we do a few times. I am going to do it again. In part because it's kind of, for me, it's like this call to action. Kelsey was just talking about operating in silos and, you know, tying in some of what Debbie said, like this morning, if you were here for the power of the positive, just this notion of collaboration and how we can all help each other. SERAC is one of 5 regional behavioral health action organizations operating in the state of Connecticut. So there's one in each of DEMIS's 5 regions. And each one of them serves the towns within their region, right? So SERAC, we are that pink region on the right, serving the 41 towns of Eastern Connecticut. But we have a sister agency in each of the other 5 regions. So I know that some of us on the call today are not from Eastern Connecticut. If you are one of those people and you would like to get involved with your regional behavioral health action organization, I absolutely encourage you to do so. We do better work when we work together, right? So I think too, we have a tendency to kind of feel as though, if you think about it, we talk about how there's a lack of resources. There's a lack of, there's a lot of staff turnover. What else do we say? There's really long wait times for providers or bed availability. There's all these things that we feel like we lack. But something I found in working in the prevention space and such a collaborative space is that when we all get to the same table, we realize that there's actually a lot more out there. We're just working in silos a little bit too much. So the more we can all be at that same table, the better. And I think that's one of the functions of the Regional Behavioral Health Action Organizations. So if you are not involved with yours, please reach out to us and we can get you in contact with them. If you are from Eastern Connecticut, then we are your people. And please get connected with one of us. We've all shared our emails, and you'll be getting correspondence from us afterwards. But we operate in the prevention space. If you look at the continuum of care, I bet a lot of you guys are more in the treatment space. We are solely in prevention, and we implement proven practices that reduce the impacts of behavioral health challenges across the lifespan in areas of opioids, overdose prevention, vaping and cannabis, problem gambling, alcohol, so much of which you've heard about already today. But we also do mental health promotion and suicide prevention. And we achieve this through collaboration with community members, key stakeholders, by conducting needs assessments, doing capacity building, training, technical assistance, consultation on best practices, and advocacy work. So, excuse me, I am the suicide prevention program lead here at SERAC, and that's something I hold near and dear, both professionally and personally. So I can't help but kind of weave some of those themes throughout what we're going to be talking about today, in terms of empathy as a concept, and more specifically, empathy in the workplace. The way I see it, empathy is one of the common threads that's really critical in prevention work, and it connects all of the challenges that SERAC really works to address and prevent. So you'll see the marriage of our prevention efforts across all of these programs, and the need for empathy with them as we continue. Just like a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about. During our short time together, we're going to focus on a few specific areas. We're going to spend some time focusing on the neuroscientific findings related to empathy, but science is not really my strong suit, so we're going to keep it real surface level. But we're going to also explore some of the various characteristics seen in empathy, and the way that we express empathy. We're going to aim to understand some of the common barriers when it comes to truly showing up in the space of empathy for other people, and consider some of the long-term approaches, things within our control that we can do now to promote and foster empathy in the workplace and just in our lives in general. We know that empathy is really foundational for so many things in life, in the workplace, and all the small circles that we operate in, right? And family and volunteer groups. A lot of people have mentioned faith communities in the chat, relating that to different things. All of our circles of life that we operate in, empathy is critical. So what comes to mind when we hear empathy? Empathy can entail so much for people. So many of us hear the term empathy and automatically think of times where we were met with empathy, maybe have like a fond memory or experience in the past with it. Others may think of how important it is or how they value it. Some of us may long for it or feel like we don't have enough of it in our lives or in our workplace, and wish we, saw more of it in the world. So if you guys don't mind putting into the chat what comes to mind when you hear empathy, just some words or phrases. Understanding, Megan said. What else comes to mind when we think empathy? Caring. Game changer. Thank you. That's a good one. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Yes. Compassion. Oh, compassion times 2. Leading with kindness and patience. That's perfect. Love. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for throwing those in the chat. Listening. Much needed and powerful. More prevalent in some spaces than others. Thank you for that acknowledgement. So yeah, it's something non-judgmental. Yes. It's something that maybe we see in some areas more than others, or comes naturally in some environments than others. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today as we go through. Okay. So there's all sorts of definitions of empathy, and some of them differ slightly, right? Or highlight certain kind of key points. But for our purposes right now in this moment, we'll define empathy as one's ability to attempt to emotionally understand what other people feel, see things from their point of view, and imagine yourself in their situation and how that might feel. For many of us, like I know a lot of us who are here today operate within the helping professions. And we may have an awareness of a woman named Brene Brown. She's done a tremendous amount of work, incredible work, might I add, in the space of empathy. So for those of us who have not heard of her, we are going to learn a little bit about her. Some of her, you'll see, like I have some quotes and some images throughout the presentation. Many of them are Brene Brown quotes. She's done a lot of work in this area. But she approaches empathy from the lens of connecting with the emotions that underpin an experience for people. So moreover, empathy is not just about our intellectual understanding of what someone may be going through, but rather connecting to the emotional core of another person's experiences. So as we continue to go through our time together today, I'll identify areas in which prevention and empathy have some important fundamental similarities. An example here can be seen by empathy's need for vulnerability. In order to be empathetic, we need to be willing to be a bit vulnerable, because we must be vulnerable in order to connect with someone. And in order to connect empathetically, we have to connect with something inside ourselves too, something that knows the feeling another person might be going through based on what it is they're expressing. And again, that takes vulnerability. We know that vulnerability takes a lot of courage too. So in the suicide prevention space where I normally operate, there's a common theme in a lot of those suicide prevention trainings in the area of courage. You know, we know that it takes a heck of a lot of courage to reach out and ask for help. Help-seeking behaviors themselves take a lot of courage if I'm someone who's experiencing suicidal ideation, or I'm somebody who may be at risk. And conversely, or similarly, I should say, if I'm worried about somebody that I care about, somebody that I know, somebody in my life, me reaching out to them to ask and inquire, to show care and concern, that also takes a heck of a lot of courage, right? So courage is another common thread that we see in all of this type of work. When we think about benefits to empathy, and this is just benefits in general, not specific to the workplace, we'll get into some of those in just a minute. But general benefits of empathy, there's so many of them. We could have a whole nother presentation on just that. But for the purposes of right now, there's just a few names here on this slide. We know that empathy provides us with greater social connection. Connection is yet another common area in empathy and prevention. Here at SERAC, we operate under the notion, or the motto, the saying, that connection quite literally is prevention. Connection to myself, right? Connection to others, connection to resources, connection to help. Connection is prevention, and it doesn't matter what type of prevention it is or what we're trying to prevent. Empathy increases our social connection, and this is critically important, both for our physical well-being, our psychological well-being, our well-being as humans. We know that empathy supports and promotes help-seeking behaviors. And that's, again, another really important concept in all types of prevention. And we know that empathy assists both parties. So the person receiving empathy and the person expressing empathy, you know, they both have improved ability in that moment to regulate emotions. So just yet another benefit. There's so many others to empathy as a concept and practice. And to be honest, it was a little tough to kind of decide which ones I wanted to incorporate into this. These felt like the most appropriate in the moment when developing. But if you feel like there's others that come to mind for you, or others you think deserve to be on the slide, because I could have fit a couple more, then please throw them in the chat. I'd love to hear them. Okay. So not to get too into like the history of things, but if we look at a little bit of empathy in history, the concept and language explaining empathy has been around for quite some time. In 1909, there was an English psychologist. His name was Edward, I'm going to mess this up, Edward Titchener. He coined the term, and it was a translation from a German word meaning feeling into. So he coined the term empathy, and it was based off of a word meaning feeling into. If we look at concepts like altruism and heroism, they're both really deeply intertwined with empathy, right? Empathy and the ability to understand and share feelings of others really fuels altruistic behavior. And it does this by creating a strong emotional connection, and that motivation to help based off that strong emotional connection. If we look at like some heroic acts, oftentimes they involve deep personal risk, right? And often they're also rooted in a deep sense of empathy and a desire to alleviate the suffering of another person. So many of us get into these helping professions like prevention, treatment, recovery treatment, teaching, social service, law enforcement, EMS, all of these helping professions. So many of us get involved out of like a call to action. We have this desire to help other people. We want to alleviate suffering or instill hope, empower others. I know in my former line of work, and there's some people on the call here today that I had the absolute pleasure of working with in the treatment space. It's this need and desire to empower others, to give others that empowerment, that strength. All of these things touch on empathy and its importance. And all of these things themselves are really deeply rooted in empathy. This was a quote I just couldn't, you're also going to see there's quotes all throughout this presentation. This one by Carl Rogers, I couldn't help but put in here that empathy is the listener's effort to hear the other person deeply, accurately, and non-judgmentally. Empathy involves skillful, reflective listening that clarifies and amplifies the person's own experiencing and meaning without imposing the listener's own material. In part, I put this in because again, tying it into the suicide prevention piece, there's a lot of kind of common language throughout some of the different curriculums out there about just the importance of listening to listen and not listening to say, well, you think that's bad, guess what I've been through, right? Like to truly listen without imposing our own material. Very, very important. This quote just kind of stuck with me for a bit. So like I said, we're going to get into, sorry, I was trying to look at the chat. Let me not act like I can do two things. I am not that person. So like I said, we're not going to get too into the neuroscientific piece of things. We're just going to kind of do it at a surface level, but I think it is valuable. So like so many of our human experiences, all of them, we know that empathy serves a purpose for us, right? As individuals operating in a larger community, a society. And if we take a look at some of the neurobiological functions, we can see the evolutionary need for empathy in the human experience. There's two parts of what's called the mirror neuron system of our brains that we're going to look at. So both the mirror neurons themselves, and then a portion of the brain called the inferior frontal gyrus. So mirror neurons are thought to play a key role in our ability to understand the emotions of other people. Our that's hard for me to say, mirror neurons fire or activate when we experience an emotion. Similarly, they activate when we observe another person experiencing an emotion. So this creates like a sense of resonance with us and allows us to understand their feelings and thus experience empathy. Mirror neurons allow us to like simulate the actions or the emotions of another person internally. Similarly, the inferior frontal gyrus can be seen as being activated when we do like MRI research, being activated both during the observation and when we imitate emotional expression. So that sheds light on its role in experiencing emotions vicariously. And we also know that this region of the brain is involved in recognizing and responding to emotional facial expressions. Another kind of like just takeaway that this is probably coming from an evolutionary standpoint is that it's particularly good at recognizing when others are expressing emotions that are connected to like pain or distress in some way. So I thought that was pretty cool. There's some studies out there that show a bit of difference in experience and expression of empathy across sexes. And some of this is through just kind of research done through self-report, with women reporting that they experience and express empathy at higher rates. when directly asked. However, there's some degree of neurobiological evidence to support some of these differences in brain function. So some studies suggest that females show a bit of a stronger neural activation in emotion-related brain areas during empathy-related tasks. There's some other studies out there that suggest oxytocin, which is a hormone associated with things like social bonding and empathy, may play a role in some of the differences in gender empathy expression and experience. But furthermore, I can't help but add in, we know that other social behaviors, social norms, cultural norms, the family I came up in, all of these sorts of things absolutely influence our perceived differences as well. So taking a moment here, we're going to acknowledge empathy as a skill that can bring people together and make people feel included, while sympathy creates an uneven power dynamic and can lead to more isolation and disconnection. So that's really our difference we're looking at. Sympathy is a common feeling or understanding, while empathy is the ability to understand those feelings. Empathy involves actively sharing in the person's emotional experience, whereas sympathy involves feeling concern for their situation. So just reading that one other sentence again, sympathy can create an uneven power dynamic and can lead to more isolation and disconnection. And it's really unfortunate because even sympathy most often comes from a really good place, right? Sympathy comes from a good place. We're not often sympathetic out of malintent. So that's why it's important to have this like conscious, forward push for empathy over sympathy. As you can see here, I did include a short Brene Brown clip. Empathy fuels connection, sympathy drives disconnection. So many of us in helping professions have heard of her, like I already mentioned. You probably know her work, or maybe you love her work like I do. There's a very good chance you've seen the video we're about to watch on the next slide. And if so, I don't think you can see it too many times. I think it's a nice refresher if it's been a while. It makes me smile literally every time that I see it. If you've never seen it, you're in for a bit of a treat. I'm not gonna lie, I gotta make sure that we can hear me. Hold on. I have a feeling I didn't share my sound. But the good thing is I can hear tech support running over here. Hold on just one second. Oh, wait, I think I figured it out. I figured it out. I just needed your support. Okay, we're gonna watch a video, guys. Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for the empathy, Megan. All right.
So you think you know Wix, but do you really? First up, we've got
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay. So now that we've watched that video, like I said, I really love that video, but if you feel comfortable, please put some brief thoughts into the chat. How did you feel being on the receiving end of empathy? Think about a time when you either showed someone empathy or somebody showed you empathy. Why was it so important to you? What emotional connection was made? And we'll just give people a second to do that. It made me feel less alone and like someone had my back. Yeah. Provided hope. Julia, that makes me think of feeling seen, feeling heard. Yeah, felt heard, Melissa. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, it's powerful stuff. And relief. Yep. It's powerful stuff. And we're going to talk about it in a few minutes, but it's free. It's free. It's one of the few things. It gave me a chance to talk about something I wouldn't have talked about otherwise. Yes. Empathy showed me things were going to be okay. Yes. Yes. Love that. Feel free to keep throwing them in the chat, but I have a tendency to talk too much, so we're going to keep moving. This is a quote that I just really, really liked. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Maya Angelou. All right. Empathy and connection aid us in all hardships, in hardships of all kinds, whether that's mental health, behavioral health challenges, suicidal ideation, so many things that we already talked about and learned about today, throwing grief and loss in there, addiction complications, general life challenges, right? Empathy is simple, empathy is actionable, and empathy is vital. Not to keep tooting the same horn, but both empathy and connection play a critical role in everything that we do as a prevention agency. We view both connection and empathy as catalysts for prevention and aiding in hardships in general. This holds true in our personal lives, and it's not spoken about enough, but this is critical in our workplaces. We also like to mention how we view the concept of recovery too, right? I think recovery is often tied to certain hardships pertaining to substance use, and absolutely true. But the way we try to view recovery is there's all sorts of things we can recover from, right? And a lot of them are listed here on this slide, but there's even more than that. So looking at recovery as a broad concept. So empathy in the workplace is vital for both employee and employer long-term success. Our workplaces should do everything in their power to care about those they employ. We often hear about for those they serve, if they're those types of agencies or workplaces, but also for those who they employ. And show care in the workplace setting in all available instances. In my role in suicide prevention, I spend a lot of times in schools, whether that's middle schools, high schools, colleges. I do stuff like providing trainings, participating in their fresh check days, tabling events, health fairs, all those kinds of things. And when I'm working with the youth population, the school age population, and through the lens of suicide prevention and mental health promotion, there is such an acknowledgement that for many youth, school can be one of their safe places. And for some youth, it's their only safe space. Making that connection to the substance exposed youth that we were just talking about. Sometimes home isn't a safe space and school is. So there's so much effort in cultivating this, ensuring this sacred safety is promoted and encouraged, expanded and protected. However, somewhere along the way as adults, we lose our way with this. We find ourselves or may find ourselves in a workforce that does not always have the ability to hold us in space when we need it. The simple, cost-effective, or even free answer is empathy, support in the workplace. It's a large part of the perception of safety in schools for the students, and it's something that sometimes we're missing in our workforces. I take a moment here to talk about my significant other who has a tendency to, he said it like twice, maybe I'm exaggerating, not a tendency to, he said it twice, but that work is a break from the stresses of life that aren't work related. So at first I was put off because how could you possibly need a break from me? I am a breath of fresh air and an angel at all times. But all jokes aside, work is predictable. Work occupies our minds. It provides us purpose. It provides us connection to others. We may be at work more waking hours than we're with our families. And whether we realize it or not, if work is one of our safe spaces as adults, it's likely because we're probably met with empathy there quite frequently. Just looking at a few images here, we know that many of life's hardships can have a direct impact on our job performance. Of course they can, right? Of course they can. Whether it be addiction, whether it be mental health struggles, whether it may be healing from loss, going through a divorce, right? All sorts of things that happen outside of work absolutely impact our employee versions of ourselves. Employees need what people need, and what people need is support, understanding, empathy. Without it, we know that people can be impacted negatively by the fact that their job performance is taking a hit. And this can play a role in our tendency to kind of spiral or feel stuck in spaces of shame, spaces of guilt, rather than healing and improving. So I love this image of the shame spiral. I think it shows like what our minds can kind of do to us sometimes. And it just communicates to me how empathy can really stop at any one of those spirals. So just an acknowledgement here, in the 1930s, Alcoholics Anonymous started actively practicing empathy in the workplace. And in the process, they pioneered employee assistance programs. They identified something then, almost 100 years ago, that still holds very, very true today. People perform better when they receive the support they need, and businesses perform better when people perform better. So put simply, businesses need people and people need support. And people who are struggling with substance use have an even greater need for that support. And it's not just them, it's not just substance abuse. It's people struggling with all sorts of things. There's a far-reaching umbrella of behavioral health and a myriad of challenges that fall underneath it. Everyone affected by these challenges needs support. And everyone affected by these challenges needs support. And there's no immunity to what we're facing. There's no way to go through life without being impacted by it, either directly or through the effect it may have on someone you care about. But in a similar fashion, everyone is also capable of doing something about it. Over time, our understanding of behavioral health has continued to grow and adapt and change and become more inclusive and better. And just like that, we've been able to learn about more tools. Our tools for responding are growing as well. We've been talking a lot about empathy, which is the main tool we're talking about today, but we're also, we're going to talk about a second tool that can be applied to the workplace in just a few slides. But first, we're going to talk about a little bit about how we can begin fostering empathy in the workplace and really make it a part of what we do on the day-to-day. So looking here, I'm not going to, in Business Solver's 2017 workplace report, empathy has a direct impact on employee productivity, loyalty, and engagement. So these numbers are so striking to me. 77% of workers would be willing to work more hours for a more empathetic workplace. I am one of those people. I am willing to work more at SERAC than I was at my former job. It's when we feel seen, we feel supported, we feel heard, we're going to get all into that. 60% of people would accept a slashed salary for the same. 92% of HR professionals note that a compassionate workplace is a major factor for employee retention, and it just makes sense. And then here, if we look at two different generations, 80% of millennials noted they would leave their current job if their office became less empathetic. And 66% of baby boomers also shared this sentiment. So it's a people thing. It's not a generational thing per se. It's a human thing. So if we look a little bit at the importance of empathy again, furthermore, practicing empathy also leads to greater adaptability and an increase in psychological safety. Psychological safety at work is something everyone deserves. Something everyone deserves to experience, but it's not always something that everyone understands. But we sure do understand when we don't have it. It's the ability to admit when something isn't working or a mistake has been made. It's the ability to feel comfortable offering a new idea or a different perspective. It's a critical component of growth, and it suffers in environments where we don't practice strong empathy. People who don't feel supported or seen are unlikely to speak up, and workplaces that don't get the full range of suggestions from all of their employees are less prepared to adapt and grow and perform. And psychological safety leads to stronger engagement. As people see their peers being genuinely supported and supportive, as people feel heard and understood by leadership, they perform better. They pay more attention to their work because they understand how their work impacts the team and impacts each other. They work harder because they do not want to let people down, and they care about the overall success of themselves and their coworkers. Empathy is vital. It's how we build meaningful relationships. It's how we build strong friendships. It's the superpower that makes genuine connection possible, and perhaps one of the most important skill sets that a job can have. And like any skill, it can be trained, it can be improved, and it's something we can work on. So we'll talk about that in just a few slides. But for any of you who know me or Eric, we have to throw an office reference into everything we do because it just tracks. There's a Gallup poll that the top 100 workspaces use to measure how happy their staff is. One of the most important questions, in our opinion, on that poll is, do you have a best friend at work? Only 30% of employees who respond to the survey say yes to that question, but those 30% are 7 times more likely to be engaged in their job. And that question is the best predictor of having a higher well-being and engagement at work. Practicing empathy at work leads to stronger connections at every level, between staff members, between the collective whole and leadership, and stronger connections between the staff and the agency and the community in which they serve. Those stronger connections also lead to improved communication. By better understanding someone, you better understand how to talk to them, how to make sure you've heard them, how to hear them in return. It allows you to understand the viewpoint of the person you're speaking with and enables them to see things from your perspective as well. At workplaces with strong foundation of empathy, you'll hear people say things, in places where there's not a strong foundation of empathy, you'll hear things like, well, I did my part. That's not on me, not my problem, things like that. But on a team where the focus is on how the team performs and not just individuals, every member of the team will work harder. Megan literally came running to my aid and to Katie's aid when we needed technical support, just a cute example. So can empathy be learned? Yes, absolutely. It's like a muscle. So it takes, intentional exercise and practice, and it can be hard work. But just like many things, we kind of have like our natural baseline, and maybe it's something we feel naturally strong at. But for those of us who don't, it can be worked on. We can see improvement if we commit to implementing it in all areas of our life, right? Not just work, not just home, not just intimate relationship, but across settings. It takes intentional practice and patience. And when it comes to improving any emotional intelligence skills, including this, asking yourself honestly in interactions, how does this matter to me? and kind of reflecting on how it matters to you, why it matters to you, and having those conversations with yourself. So there are some conscious choices we make some conscious choices we can make to help us practice empathy. Awareness is key. We've talked a lot about how important it is, and how important it is in the workplace. I also view this awareness as intentionally exposing yourself to differences. This can help provide like a backdrop against which to adopt someone else's perspective. There's a professor at the University of Oregon named Sarah Hodges, who explains whether you are actively perspective taking or not, if you just pay more attention to other people, you're likely to feel more concern for them and become more involved in their experiences. It's important that we practice both active listening and supportive listening. Active listening focuses on making sure that we're present, providing our full attention, ensuring we're understanding the person's message, by kind of doing some motivational interviewing stuff, right? Summarizing thoughts back to them, clarifying questions. But with supportive listening, we're prioritizing and acknowledging the person's emotions, the emotions that they're sharing behind the message, providing some level of emotional support, even if needed, and validating their feelings. Both of these are crucial when we're practicing empathy for others. Body language is always important, right? And this is both for when we're listening and practicing empathy, and conversely, when we're being empathetic with someone, paying attention to their body language. We mentioned earlier about how our brains understand and process empathetic response in part due to these facial expressions and nonverbal cues. So it's important on both ends. Understanding that we can be empathetic with people even if we don't agree with them. These two things can absolutely coexist, and assuming that they cannot in and of itself is a barrier to practicing empathy. Asking questions is really important too. In expressing empathy, it helps to understand. It helps us further understand. It helps us build trust. We learn more about them and about their lives, and it shows interest. Asking questions facilitates like natural disclosure of things, right? It makes it so that we have more dynamic or like open discussions about things. Over the long term, expressing interest helps us facilitate empathy in relationships. And then lastly, keeping our judgments in check. That's absolutely our job. And working to resolve and heal them if we have them, ideally. I view this as understanding our blocks, our own blocks and barriers to empathy, right? Having a reflective ability to understand our areas where it's harder for us to connect with others, or harder for us to relate to their experience. Do this by second guessing yourself. Allow people to prove you wrong. Spend time with someone you think you might not relate to or understand. We view empathetic listening, to me, it's a lot like supportive listening. We have our verbal and nonverbal prompts. So showing that you're listening. Tell me more about blank, nodding your head. A lot of these are things we already talked about: reflective listening, being attentive and present. Think of how many times you have somebody giving you their full attention. It's very infrequent now, right? And there's value in that. Responding appropriately, providing feedback. In empathetic listening, you listen with your ears, but you also, and more importantly, listen with your eyes and your heart. So there are some challenges for some people to empathy. There's all sorts of factors that could come to hinder someone's ability to be empathetic. This can include emotional barriers. These would be things like stress and fatigue, being under so much stress that you feel like you don't have time to relate to other people. You can't pay mind to the needs or feelings of others because you're just stretched so thin and don't have the bandwidth, if you will. This feels like a good time to kind of note the importance of self-care in this area as well. We help people more when we're able to help ourselves and prioritize ourselves. And empathy is included in that. We may also experience emotional detachment. This can be an intentional thing or maybe unintentional, but it's a detachment as a coping skill maybe for some people, but that can very much debilitate our ability to empathize with others. Sometimes individuals have a fear of being vulnerable with others. Expressing empathy requires vulnerability, so we might avoid that due to discomfort. It could also be things like poor listening skills, maybe, some miscommunication, things like that, compassion fatigue and burnout, lack of diversity can also fuel these challenges. So just all things to be aware of and mitigate within our communities and workspaces. Another quote for us. I like quotes. Empathy has no script. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. It's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting, and communicating that incredibly healing message of you're not alone. So these are 4 key steps. These are derived from Brené Brown themselves. Perspective taking, or putting yourself in someone else's shoes, staying out of judgment and listening, recognizing emotion in another person that you may have felt before, and communicating that you recognize that emotion. That 4th one being key. Sometimes we can recognize things and we keep them internal, but having the courage to be like, hey, recognize it, talk about it, express it, and show it. And I just love this. I define connection as the energy that exists between 2 people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. So much of which you guys just put in the chat. When they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. So now is the time to kind of tie in our second tool. So we've talked a lot about empathy and all of its value, and taking just a moment to transition to talking a bit about our second tool, recovery-friendly workplaces, which is a brilliantly simple and easily implemented framework for putting empathy into action in the workplace. So I've told you I work in suicide prevention. Eric Reynolds, who just had a beautiful baby and is not talking, is our recovery-friendly workplace coordinator. He runs that whole program. So in a lot of ways, we acknowledge that in a conference like this, it sometimes feels like we're preaching to the choir. We have people who understand this stuff. The people who do this type of work care, and that's why I'm here. I care, and I believe that you care too. But there are people attending this conference too who might not work in a recovery-friendly workplace, and you should be. Each and every one of us should be a recovery-friendly workplace. We should be certified by the state. Some of us, like SERAC included, and I know some others on this call already are. And we should be holding those proclamations high above our heads and bragging about them. I work at a recovery-friendly workplace as often as we can. In the state of Connecticut, we're the ones who lead the charge. We're doing so in so many areas: suicide prevention, Narcan administration, and empathy in the workplace through recovery-friendly workplaces, to name a few. And it's important that people see us leading the charge. It's important that people see us championing our successes so loudly that they have to turn to their boss with a little bit of a side eye and say, why aren't we a recovery-friendly workplace? Some of you do this work and deserve the badge for it and don't have it yet. And maybe that's because we haven't connected with you yet, but all 5 DMIS regions facilitate recovery-friendly workplace programming. So reaching out to us and we will get you in contact with the right person. And during Eric's paternity leave, our own Deborah Walker, who opened up the day for us, is taking over RFW. So we're still making strides to get businesses certified as recovery-friendly workplaces. But they prepare us all to support the people who need it most. It involves having peer champions within the organization, people who have received training, people who are trained to see the importance of cultivating compassion and active listening and are prepared to put them into play. They're provided with resources they can use to pair and support with action, phone numbers for support groups in their region, information on warm beds, inpatient, outpatient, resources that can connect people with the help that they need without jeopardizing employment, being like the big key, supporting employees where they are. So they become a part of a growing network of employers who understand the value of investing in their employees in a program that doesn't cost employers anything. It's about creating a culture, offering support, providing resources, and showing people that they are cared for. We're going to look at a list in just a second of all the recovery-friendly workplaces in Region 3. There's over 24 of them, including like restaurants, municipalities, and a whole bunch of nonprofits. But we have people in our region who are employed today and still employed today because their employer became a recovery-friendly workplace. And that is powerful stuff. Putting into practice an empathy-driven approach that saves people's jobs, saves businesses money. We've streamlined the approach to make sure that every peer champion receives Narcan and QPR suicide prevention training. So tying in some of these other concepts of recovery and what that could look like. We know that empathy itself is trauma informed. Empathy driven, being empathy driven is culturally sensitive and culturally competent. Being empathy driven is the start of the work, not the end. But nothing else can happen until the work's been started. So if you're interested in becoming a recovery friendly workplace, please reach out to us. We'll get you in contact with the right person if it's not us. But it's something within our control, and it's really not a big lift. I can't speak to RFW as well as Eric or Debbie can. So if there's anything critical I'm missing, please feel free to jump off mute, guys. But it's a beautiful thing. If we look at recovery-friendly workplaces in Eastern Connecticut, these are either all or most of them. And we keep growing. As you'll see, there's some municipalities on there. We're on there. I think a lot of you are from a lot of these places. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm grateful for that whole program. And then yet another quote, because I like them. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Oh, wait, Eric raised his hand. Eric, you don't have to do that. Hop off mute.
Hey.
Okay. Yeah, go.
So I'm not sure if you guys can see me. I'm on my cell phone here because I've got a baby girl with me. I wanted to jump in for just a minute because Dani had touched on, we have employers in Region 3 in Eastern Connecticut who have kept employees on because they've gone through the recovery-friendly workplace training. So we're talking about the importance of putting empathy in action, really sort of putting that into practice. Mm-hmm. Having somebody struggling with substance use disorder, whether it's themselves or they have a loved one going through it, having somebody struggling with a suicidal ideation, and being able to come in and support them immediately in the moment, that's life-changing. Right? We know there are people in our region who have had the life change because of this kind of work, but that's the sort of thing you want to have in place before the need for it arises. You don't want to have an employee coming to you saying, hey, I've been struggling, and now you're trying to find a way to support them. You want to get that training, that support first, so you can then give it to them when they need it. But in Eastern Connecticut, we've already changed people's lives with this program and with leading into that kind of empathy. So I want to throw that out there. And Dani, you are doing a fantastic job. And if you guys can see, this is the reason I'm not there.
Look at her. Thank you, Eric. You have just this ability to put things in such a concise and relatable sentence. So I appreciate you doing that. So this is the first time in my life I haven't gone over a time I'm supposed to talk. I usually go over. So I see more stuff in the chat. Thank you, Daniela. Yay, you're an RFW too. Awesome. Yeah, there's more out there than you would think. And I think it's just like to Eric's point, like bragging about it, like brag about the fact that you're a recovery friendly workplace. It's a beautiful thing. So much value there. Helping people. It's what we all do, right? If you don't mind taking a moment and scanning that QR code. Why does it look wonky? I'm going to try it. Okay, it's working. It just looks weird. But anyways, please scan the QR code and fill out the evaluation for me. And that's my contact information. So didn't put Eric's on there. He's unavailable. If you happen to write down Debbie's from the first presentation, she is the new RFW person right now. If not, reach out to me and I'll get you in contact with her. And again, if you're from a different RBHAO region, if you're not from Eastern Connecticut, reach out to me and I will get you in contact with the appropriate equivalent of Eric over in your region. Are there any questions, comments, thoughts, anything like that? QR code's not working for you, Julia. Okay. Yeah, it looks cut off a bit. Thank you for the feedback. Okay. So for those of you staying on, I will put the link into the chat and I will email it to all of you when you get your certificates. Thank you so much for listening to me.